The night of August 25, 1940, changed the course of the air war over Europe forever. For months, the citizens of Berlin had been assured by Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring that no enemy aircraft would ever penetrate the airspace of the Reich capital. If a single British bomb ever fell on Berlin, Göring famously boasted, people could call him Meyer, but on that late August evening, the drone of twin-engine Armstrong-Whitworth-Whitley bombers of the Royal Air Force shattered that illusion. 81 British bombers had taken off from bases in England, flying through the dark and cloud-covered skies of Western Europe to strike a psychological blow at the heart of National Socialist Germany. Though the physical damage of this first raid was minor, the political and psychological shockwaves were seismic. Adolf Hitler, humiliated and enraged by the British audacity, demanded an immediate and overwhelming response. It was not merely a military challenge, but a direct threat to the prestige of his regime. Within days, Hitler sat at his desk and began sketching his own personal designs for what would become some of the most massive, intimidating, and indestructible defensive structures in human history, the Flak Towers, or Flak Towers. To turn these personal sketches into physical reality, Hitler summoned his chief architect, Albert Speer, and Dr. Fritz Todt, the head of the massive state construction organ, Organisation Todt. The directive was clear and non-negotiable. Berlin was to be ringed by 3 colossal concrete fortresses that would serve a dual purpose. They would act as heavy anti-aircraft battery platforms capable of throwing a wall of high-explosive steel into the path of incoming bombers, and they would simultaneously serve as secure air raid shelters for tens of thousands of German civilians. The scale of the construction was unprecedented in modern urban planning. Organisation Todt was ordered to prioritize these projects above almost all others, diverting critical supplies of high-grade steel, premium aggregate concrete, and thousands of labourers from the front lines and other vital war industries. This was the birth of the Concrete Colossus, an emergency defensive programme that would ultimately consume millions of tons of building materials and millions of man-hours, all to counter a threat that Germany had believed it would never have to face. The strategic placement of these towers was meticulously planned to form an overlapping triangle of defensive fire over the centre of Berlin. The first pair, known as Flakturm-Wulfs, was slated for construction in the lush gardens of the Berlin Zoo, guarding the government quarter and the Reichstag. The second, Flakturm II, was positioned in Friedrichshain to protect the vital industrial zones to the east. The third, Flakturm III, was constructed in Humboldthain to cover the northern approaches. Each site was to consist of 2 distinct structures, a massive combat tower, or G-tower, which housed the heavy guns, and a smaller lead tower, or L-tower, which housed the advanced radar and range-finding equipment. Together, these paired structures would operate as unified defensive hubs, turning the capital of the Reich into an urban fortress. As the ground was broken in the autumn of 1940, the citizens of Berlin watched in awe as the massive excavations began, realizing that the war had finally come home, cast in steel and reinforced concrete. The sheer physical scale of the Flak Towers is difficult to comprehend without examining the meticulous, over-engineered structural designs drawn up by architect Friedrich Tamms. Tamms, working closely under Albert Speer's direction, designed the combat towers, or G-towers, as massive concrete blockhouses. The first generation of G-towers, constructed in Berlin, measured 75 meters square and stood 39 meters tall, roughly equivalent to a modern 13-story building. The walls were constructed of solid steel-reinforced concrete with a thickness of up to 3.5 meters at the base, tapering slightly to 2.5 meters near the top. The roof was a monstrous slab of concrete 5 meters thick, specifically designed to withstand direct hits from the heaviest Allied bombs in existence at the time, including the British 4,000-pound Cookie blockbuster. This level of reinforcement required a density of steel rebar that was completely unprecedented, with thousands of tons of interlocking iron rods woven together before the concrete was poured, creating a monolithic structure that was practically impervious to conventional explosives. The construction of these fortresses was a triumph of logistical mobilization and a testament to the brutal efficiency of Organization Todt. To meet the aggressive deadlines demanded by Hitler, construction crews worked in continuous 24-hour shifts under massive searchlights. The logistics of supplying these sites were staggering, requiring a constant stream of freight trains and heavy trucks delivering sand, gravel, cement, and water from across the Reich. At the height of construction, over 20,000 workers, including specialized German engineers, foreign conscripts and forced laborers, were deployed on the Berlin sites alone. The concrete was mixed on-site using giant industrial batching plants and pumped continuously into the wooden formwork to prevent structural seams, which would create weak points in the armor. In total, the construction of a single Flak Tower pair consumed over 100,000 cubic meters of concrete and upwards of 10,000 tons of structural steel, a massive diversion of strategic materials that could have otherwise armored hundreds of tanks or built dozens of frontline U-boats. The interior layout of the G Towers was designed with the precision of a self-contained underground city. The lower floors were dedicated to civilian defense, featuring massive gas-proof steel doors, advanced air filtration systems to protect against chemical attacks, and sleeping quarters for up to 15,000 people, though in the final months of the war, these spaces would hold double that number. The middle floors housed critical military infrastructure, including a fully equipped 80-bed military hospital with its own operating theaters, a secure backup command center for the Berlin air defense grid, and climate-controlled storage vaults for invaluable cultural treasures, including the gold of the Reichsbank and the famous bust of Nefertiti. The upper floors were reserved for the combat crews, ammunition storage, and the massive mechanical hoists that lifted heavy shells directly to the gun platforms on the roof. Every square meter of the structure was designed to maximize survivability, ensuring that even if the surrounding city was completely leveled, the tower would remain fully operational, independent of the municipal power, water, and communication grids. The true defensive teeth of the Flak Towers lay on their massive open-air roof platforms, where the most advanced anti-aircraft weaponry of the Second World War was deployed. The centerpiece of this defensive armament was the 12.8-centimeter Flak 40 Zwilling, a twin-barrel heavy anti-aircraft gun that represented the absolute pinnacle of wartime artillery engineering. Weighing over 27 tons, each Zwilling mount consisted of two coupled 12.8-centimeter barrels firing simultaneously. These guns were capable of launching a 26-kilogram high-explosive shell to an incredible maximum vertical ceiling of nearly 15,000 meters, far above the operational altitude of any Allied bomber. The rate of fire was equally staggering, with a well-trained crew capable of firing up to 28 rounds per minute. When all four twin mounts on a G-tower roof fired in unison, they created a local wall of high-explosive shrapnel that was completely impenetrable, tearing apart any aircraft unfortunate enough to fly through the designated sector. To guide these massive guns with surgical precision, the combat towers relied entirely on their paired lead towers, or L towers, located several hundred meters away. The L towers were smaller, slimmer structures designed specifically to house the complex radar and range-finding equipment away from the violent concussive blast and blinding smoke of the heavy guns. The roof of the L Tower was dominated by a massive Würzburg-Reese giant parabolic radar dish, which worked in tandem with a Freya long-range early warning radar to track incoming bomber streams from dozens of miles away. Inside the L Tower's shielded command rooms, analog computers calculated the altitude, speed, and vector of the enemy aircraft, automatically transmitting the fire control data via armored subterranean cable links directly to the gun mounts on the G Tower. This automated target tracking and predicted fire control allowed the gun crews to lay highly accurate defensive barrages even in zero visibility conditions, thick cloud cover, or heavy night raids. The ammunition handling system inside the G Tower was a mechanical marvel designed to sustain this rapid rate of fire over long engagements. Deep within the core of the tower, massive ammunition bunkers stored thousands of rounds of heavy 12.8cm shells, completely safe from enemy bombardment. To transport these heavy munitions to the roof, electric hoists operated continuously inside armored vertical shafts, delivering the shells directly to ready-use lockers located adjacent to each gun platform. If the main electrical grid failed, the hoists could be run on backup diesel generators or, in worst-case scenarios, operated manually by teams of auxiliary crews. The logistics of ammunition consumption were immense, with a single night of intense air defense firing thousands of shells, requiring a constant stream of manual replenishment from the ground-level entry portals during the brief lulls in the bombing raids. By the spring of 1945, the strategic air war had transformed into a desperate ground siege, and the Flak Towers faced their ultimate tactical test. As the Soviet Red Army breached the outer defences of Berlin in mid-April, the three massive G Towers in the city centre became islands of concrete stability in a sea of fire and ruin. The Soviet forces, armed with heavy 12 and 23mm artillery and Katyusha rocket launchers, subjected the towers to days of continuous bombardment. But the thick, reinforced concrete walls of Friedrich Tamms' design shrugged off the shells with ease. Unable to breach the structures, the Red Army was forced to simply bypass them, as the towers stood as modern urban castles, completely dominant over their respective sectors and impervious to infantry assault. The heavy 12.8cm guns on the roofs were quickly pressed into a direct-fire anti-tank role to defend the central government district. Depressing their long barrels to point directly into the shattered streets below, the gun crews utilized their advanced optics to target Soviet armor formations miles away. The impact of a 26-kilogram anti-aircraft shell designed to tear through heavy steel bombers was absolutely devastating to Soviet T-34 and IS-2 tanks. A single direct hit would completely obliterate a medium tank, often tearing the turret entirely off its hull and scattering armored debris across the street blocks. The Zoo Tower, in particular, maintained a deadly circle of defensive fire, halting Soviet advances across the nearby bridges and preventing the encirclement of the Reichstag for several critical days, demonstrating the terrifying versatility of heavy, high-velocity artillery. Inside the towers, the conditions had descended into a claustrophobic nightmare of human desperation. While designed to hold roughly 15,000 civilians, the Zoo Tower was packed with over 30,000 terrified refugees who had fled the advancing Soviet infantry. The interior air was thick, hot, and heavy, smelling of sweat, fear, and cordite, as the giant ventilation fans struggled to filter out the dust and smoke from the surrounding city. Despite the extreme crowding, the lack of sanitation, and the dwindling supplies of fresh water and food, the civilians inside were safe, completely protected from the relentless Soviet artillery fire that was systematically reducing the rest of Berlin to gravel. When the garrison finally received the order to surrender on May 2nd, 1945, the Flak Towers were among the very last German defensive positions to capitulate, standing fully intact and functional amidst the smoking ruins of the fallen Reich. While the Flak Towers proved to be tactical marvels of defense and civilian preservation during the final months of the war, they represented a catastrophic strategic mistake on the macro level of German industrial mobilization. Under the stewardship of Albert Speer's Ministry of Armaments and War Production, the building of these static concrete monoliths in Berlin, Hamburg and Vienna consumed resources of astronomical proportions. The concrete, high-tensile steel rebar, copper wiring and electrical generators poured into these structures represented a direct, major diversion of strategic materials that could have otherwise significantly altered the course of the war if redirected into mobile, flexible armaments. This was the concrete trap, a monument to defensive panic that permanently locked down Germany's rapidly dwindling industrial capacity in static, localized positions. If we analyze the raw materials consumed by the Flak Tower program, the trade-off calculation under a rationalized Speer administration becomes staggering. A single Flak Tower pair consumed roughly 100,000 cubic meters of reinforced concrete and over 10,000 tons of structural steel. Across the 8 completed tower pairs in Berlin, Hamburg and Vienna, this equated to over 80,000 tons of premium steel. In terms of armored warfare, that steel alone could have been redirected to manufacture more than 1,500 additional Panzer IV medium tanks or nearly 1,000 Jagdpanther tank destroyers. Furthermore, the specialized dual-mount 12.8cm flak guns required immensely complex manufacturing tolerances and precious copper and brass for their electrical targeting networks, resources that could have otherwise fully equipped dozens of highly mobile flak regiments or armored anti-aircraft divisions on both the eastern and western fronts. An alternative industrial strategy under a rationalized Speer administration would have prioritized the complete decentralization and underground dispersal of Germany's vital aviation and ball-bearing factories, instead of building static defensive castles. Rather than pouring millions of tons of concrete into the skies of Berlin, those same concrete mixing plants and labor forces could have been deployed to complete the massive Weingut 1 and Weingut 2 semi-underground aircraft assembly bunkers months ahead of schedule. This would have fully protected the assembly lines of the revolutionary Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter and the Arado R-234 jet bomber from the relentless Allied bombing campaigns, ensuring a steady, high-volume flow of advanced jet aircraft to the frontline squadrons, which could have contested Allied air superiority far more effectively than any static concrete tower ever could. Following the capitulation of Germany in May 1945, the victorious Allied powers faced the daunting task of demilitarizing the conquered nation, which meant dealing with the massive concrete monoliths of the Flak Towers. The Allied command, particularly the British and Soviet occupational forces, viewed these giant fortresses as dangerous monuments to militarism and symbols of resistance that had to be completely erased from the landscape. However, Friedrich Tamms's design of seamless steel-reinforced concrete proved to be just as indestructible in peace as it had been during the war, presenting a massive headache for military demolition engineers who quickly discovered that destroying them would require unprecedented amounts of high explosives. In Berlin, the British Royal Engineers undertook the task of demolishing the infamous Zoo Tower in 1947. They packed the interior of the G Tower with 25 tons of dynamite and detonated it in a massive explosion that shook the entire city. But when the smoke cleared, the tower was still standing, practically undamaged. It took a second, even larger demolition attempt using 35 tons of specialized explosives and a meticulous drilling of the internal support columns to finally bring the massive structure crashing down, reducing it to a mountain of concrete rubble that took years to clear. In the northern district of Humboldt-Hain, the French occupation forces attempted a similar demolition but were forced to stop halfway through, as the proximity of vital railway lines meant that completely destroying the tower would cause catastrophic damage to the surrounding civilian infrastructure, leaving the tower partially buried under a scenic, grass-covered hill that remains a landmark to this day. Today, the surviving Flak Towers in Vienna, Hamburg, and Berlin stand as silent, imposing sentinels of a dark chapter in human history, having evolved from symbols of total war into innovative hubs of modern urban utility. In Vienna, where all 6 towers survived intact due to their proximity to historic residential zones, the structures have been creatively repurposed, with one housing a massive public aquarium known as the Haus des Meers, and another serving as a climbing wall and contemporary art museum. In Hamburg, the massive Wilhelmsburg Flak Tower has been transformed into a revolutionary energy bunker, featuring a massive solar panel array on its roof and a large-scale biomass heat storage plant inside its thick concrete core, generating clean power for thousands of nearby homes. These indestructible colossi, designed to bring death to the skies, now serve as living monuments to resilience, proving that even the most formidable fortresses of war can ultimately be reclaimed for the benefit of peace.